Howdy, it's Kyle talking about natural wonders of North America. This is part one of a new series where I'm going to be going over some wonderful aspects of physical geography. Nature doesn't care about man-made boundaries, so I wanted to stick to the North American continent and to the islands just off of it. So whether it's geologic formations or hydrology or climate or whatever, this series is all about natural wonders of North America. So let's get started with part one. I wanted to start out the first video in this series by talking about the largest canyons in North America. Per my Penguin Dictionary of Geography from 1949, a canyon is a relatively narrow area but of considerable size bounded by steep slopes. It has often been formed by a river cutting through soft rocks of an arid region. You can get all kinds of different shapes and sizes of canyons, different lengths and widths and depths. And as a result, there are at least 6 different ways with which to measure largest canyon. 1 would be single deepest spot, 2 would be average depth, 3 would be single widest spot, 4 would be average width, 5 would be length, and 6 would be total volume. So with that many ways to define largest in terms of canyons, many call themselves the largest or second largest or whatever. But I want to start off this video by talking about the most well-known canyon in North America, the Grand Canyon. This lies in northern Arizona along the Colorado Plateau. The Grand Canyon is carved out by the Colorado River, and this is the single longest canyon in North America. The total length is about 277 miles or 446 kilometers, and the deepest spots are around 6,000 feet or about 1,830 meters. A good chunk of the canyon is located within Grand Canyon National Park, but much of what is the actual geologic canyon is not within the park itself. Parts of the canyon belong to either the Havasupai or Hualapai reservations, and other parts are part of a national monument or other protected areas. The Colorado River carved out the Grand Canyon by going through ancient layers of sedimentary rock. Most of the rock is either limestone, sandstone, or shale, and sedimentary rock is defined as having multiple layers that comprise it. So the Grand Canyon is the single longest canyon in North America, but it is not the longest canyon system on the continent. The longest canyon system in North America is the Copper Canyon in northern Mexico. This is a canyon system that consists of 6 different canyons, each carved out by a different river. The 6 rivers all come together to form the Rio Fuerte, and the Copper Canyon continues on from there. And this is the main channel of the river that continues on to the coast. Now, even though the Grand Canyon is a larger canyon than any of the individual canyons of the Copper Canyon is deeper than the Grand Canyon. But from a geology standpoint, the biggest difference between the Grand Canyon and the Copper Canyon is rock composition. Whereas the Grand Canyon is sedimentary rock, the Copper Canyon is igneous rock. Igneous rocks are formed by volcanic processes, so you don't see layering and striation like you do in sedimentary rocks. So look at these side-by-side images of the Grand and Copper Canyon, and you can easily see the difference in the composition of the rock. So even though it is difficult to determine what is largest in terms of canyons, usually when people talk about the biggest ones, they usually mean either the Grand or Copper Canyon. However, neither the Grand nor Copper Canyon are the deepest canyons in North America. The deepest canyon on the continent is Kings Canyon in the Sierra Nevada in Central California. This is the highlight of Kings Canyon National Park, which is just north of Sequoia and just south of Yosemite National Parks. As the deepest canyon in North America, it's over 8,000 feet or 2,500 meters deep. This is a relatively young canyon from a geological standpoint. It's only about 2 million or so years old, and it was formed by glacial erosion. Most canyons are formed by water erosion, but most is also running water in terms of a river, but some are going to be frozen water in terms of glacial erosion. Similar to the Copper Canyon in Mexico, Kings Canyon is mostly igneous rock and it's mostly granite. And this area has some of the steepest terrain in the entire world. There are many peaks in the region over 14,000 feet or over 4,200 meters. But just about 30 miles away as the crow flies on the floor of the San Joaquin Valley, elevations are barely 300 feet or 100 meters. And in just the part of Kings Canyon National Park, you can see elevations drop about 10,000 feet or over 3,000 meters in just about 10 miles. So it's incredibly steep terrain. Kings Canyon is incredibly steep, and it is the deepest canyon in North America. So although Kings Canyon is the deepest canyon in North America, it's not the deepest one carved out by a river. The deepest fluvial canyon in North America is Hell's Canyon, which is part of the border between Oregon and Idaho. I think a tiny bit of the canyon itself is actually in the southeastern corner of Washington, but most of it's in Oregon and Idaho. It has a depth of about 8,000 feet or about 2,400 meters, which makes it the second deepest overall canyon, but again, the largest riverine or fluvial canyon. This is the Snake River that carves this canyon out, and this is some of the most remote wilderness you're going to find in the contiguous 48 states. You'll see some images of a road going through this area, but I believe it's the only road that goes through here. Everything else in this part of Oregon and Idaho is completely wilderness. A big part of the canyon here is actually a national recreation area. It's been dammed up and you see a lot of power boats there. Hell's Canyon is another one that is primarily sedimentary rock, and like some of the other main sedimentary canyons, it's kind of a dry desert area. Oregon isn't the first state people think of when they think of desert, but most of eastern Oregon is in fact desert. So we've looked at 4 canyons that can each call themselves the largest in North America based on different stats, but what about the one that is the second longest in North America? The second longest canyon on the continent is Palo Duro Canyon in Texas. So this is the second longest canyon in North America at about 120 miles or 190 kilometers. It isn't one of the deepest canyons on the continent. It's about 880 feet or about 268 meters deep. And although it's not really surprising to hear that Texas has a large canyon, you might be surprised to learn that it isn't in the southwestern part of the state around Big Bend National Park, but rather in the Panhandle. It's located about a half an hour outside of Amarillo, not exactly where you'd expect to find a big, beautiful piece of scenery like this. And it's pretty easily accessible off of I-40, so if you're doing a cross-country road trip and you made a mistake and ate one of those 72-ounce steaks in town, go hike it off at Palo Duro Canyon. And I can't mention Palo Duro Canyon without mentioning the name of the river that carves it out. It's called the Prairie Dog Town Fork Red River. Everything is bigger in Texas, including the names of its rivers. Next, I want to talk about a couple of large gorges. So what's the difference between a canyon and a gorge? Well, nothing really. The same type of geological processes go into the formation of a gorge or a canyon, but usually when it gets to be a certain size, it's referred to as a canyon, or if it's smaller, it's a gorge. But the words really are interchangeable. Of the canyons whose official name is a gorge, the first one I wanted to mention is the Columbia River Gorge. The Columbia River is the border between Oregon and Washington, and the canyon it carves out, the gorge, is a very beautiful spot. It's about 80 miles or 130 kilometers long, and it's also quite deep, about 4,000 feet or 1,200 meters in the deepest spot. And like most of the other canyons near the west coast, the rock in this canyon is igneous. So certainly no surprise that there's been plenty of volcanic activity in this region throughout history. And the western part of the gorge is a very wet area. There's a lot of precipitation, and you combine that with the steep walls of the gorge and you end up with a lot of waterfalls. But the eastern portion of the gorge is much drier, getting into high desert, and you're not too far from Hell's Canyon mentioned earlier in the video. A large chunk of the gorge is part of the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area. More of the national park, national recreation land is on the Washington side of the gorge, but more of the Oregon side of the gorge is state park. And this is a very beautiful drive. Interstate 84 essentially parallels the gorge. And the other major canyon that's officially known as a gorge that I wanted to discuss in this video is the New River Gorge in West Virginia. And this is a very steep and relatively deep canyon as well. The deepest parts are approximately 1,000 feet or about 305 meters. And the angles of the slopes in this area are some of the steepest parts of the Appalachian Mountains. This is a relatively old canyon. It's been formed over the past 7 to 10 million years. And much like the Grand Canyon and Copper Canyon, most of the rock composition in this area is sedimentary. But the biggest difference between the New River Gorge and the other ones mentioned in this video is that this is a very wet part of the country. The other canyons that I mentioned in the west are much drier, with the exception of the western end of the Columbia River Gorge. So with the combination of the steep terrain and all of that precipitation means there's a lot of water going through the New River at all times, and this is one of the top places for whitewater rafting in the country. Right around the Gauley Bridge, the New River comes together with the Gauley River, and that forms the Kanawha River. And if you're into whitewater rafting, you've almost certainly heard of the Gauley River. And it's also worth mentioning that once a year there's an event called Bridge Day. And what this is a large gathering of people that get together, many of whom jump off the bridge. Some will be using a parachute and some will be rappelling off the bridge, but either way, it's a big spectacle. The New River Gorge has been a protected area for a very long time, but it wasn't until 2020 that it actually became a national park. I also wanted to mention what is referred to as the Grand Canyon of Canada. It's the canyon of the Stikine River in British Columbia. Even though Canada is a huge country, it isn't known for having a lot of huge canyons. This one is 45 miles or 72 kilometers long, and the deepest parts are about 1,000 feet or 300 meters. So even though that's a very large canyon and the scenery is very beautiful, it doesn't quite stack up to the other canyons mentioned in the video. And as you might expect from a canyon on this part of the continent, the rock composition is mainly igneous. And kind of like how the Gauley River in West Virginia is considered one of the best places for whitewater rafting in the US, the Stikine River area is considered one of the best areas for whitewater rafting in the world. It's often referred to as the Mount Everest of whitewater because if you've tackled it, you've tackled the most challenging one. And there's one more canyon that I want to mention in this video. Earlier I mentioned how the Grand Canyon in Arizona is the longest single canyon in North America, which is true. However, scientists have recently discovered a longer canyon in Greenland. Greenland is an island, so it isn't part of the North American continent, but when talking about geography, usually Greenland gets tossed in with North America. Whereas the Grand Canyon is about 277 miles or 446 kilometers long, this one that's referred to as simply the Grand Canyon of Greenland is about 466 miles or 750 kilometers long. Not only does this make it the longest canyon in the North American region, but also the longest canyon in the world. However, there's a big caveat with this canyon. It hasn't actually been seen. It's only been detected through radar under the Greenland ice sheet. So even though geologists know it is there and know the general size of it, you can't see any photos of it yet. But nonetheless, I felt it necessary to mention that perhaps the longest canyon on Earth is in Greenland, just off of North America. So those are the main large canyons of North America that I wanted to discuss for this video. And of course, there are many other canyons throughout the continent, some that are really well known, but maybe not quite as big. But these are the ones that are the biggest or grandest, no pun intended, that I wanted to discuss for this video. So that was part one of Natural Wonders of North America. I'll be posting videos in this series from time to time, probably quarterly, so check for the next one in about 3 months from the date of this one being posted. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up to let me know you approve, and subscribe to this channel if you're interested in learning more about geography. I'm talking about physical geography like this, talking about cities and states and ranking things, so if you like things nerdy, this is the channel for you. But yeah, thanks for watching. Geography King, signing out. I'd like to give a special thanks to my superior patrons for their support, especially Thomas H. If you're interested in buying a pin for the viewer pin map or just to support the channel, check out my Patreon page, link in the description. And as always, thank you very much.